Our team coverage turns now to the growing protests in D.C. at this hour.
And right now, Local 10 News reporter Roy Ramos is joining us live from Washington this midday. Roy, what are you seeing up there?
Christy and Janice, we are seeing large crowds. In fact, the gates of the Ellipse opened at 7 this morning, but those pro-Trump demonstrators started to arrive around 3 this morning. In fact, I spoke to one gentleman who arrived early this morning. He tells me that there's a good chance he wasn't even getting inside of the Ellipse, but that is not stopping demonstrators from arriving here and gathering on the lawn right next to the Washington Monument. Take a look at those crowds right there. President Trump on stage speaking right now, but we did see a number of speakers take the stage before him, including Rudy Giuliani. The message of demonstrators who have arrived here today is they are protesting the 2020 election, and they say their message is much larger than that. They are here to support the Constitution. Beginning early Wednesday, as businesses boarded up preparing for protesters, Trump supporters began gathering at the Ellipse near the Washington Monument, carrying Trump flags, chanting USA, Stop the Steal, and fake news, while continuing to repeat unsubstantiated claims of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election. The gates opened at 7 a.m. here at Ellipse Park, and more than an hour later, and we are still seeing this long line of people that have already registered to go inside of the event. Several speakers expected to take the stage, including President Donald Trump.
I think the election was stolen.
The result, I believe it's a big sham.
The claims have been promoted by President Trump, but refuted by election officials nationwide.
As far as the outcome, I don't think the outcome's been seen yet.
District officials have warned residents and visitors to avoid the downtown area because, unfortunately, they do believe there are extremist groups to be part of these demonstrations for the sole reason of inciting violence. For that reason, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has encouraged residents to avoid the downtown area and any confrontations.
This is our last peaceful civil disobedience.
Counter-protests are also expected, and because of that, several law enforcement agencies, including the National Guard, are out here controlling the crowds, watching for unattended bags and for people who may be carrying firearms. According to D.C. police, 6 arrests were made Tuesday, including a handful of demonstrators carrying guns. And as we come back out live to those crowds, a federal law does prohibit guns from being carried on U.S. Capitol grounds and in national park areas like the Ellipse, the National Mall, and the Freedom Plaza. Again, President Trump on stage right now. This just one of several protests that are scheduled here in the Washington, D.C. area for today. We do know that there is another protest that will be going on at Freedom Plaza. We are going to that location in just a few moments, and we'll have an update for you on Local 10 beginning first at 3. For now, here in Washington, D.C., Roy Ramos, Local 10 News. Calvin, we are standing in the same parking lot where thousands of the protesters gathered right outside of the U.S. Capitol building. You can see that they have since dispersed, but it was no easy task for law enforcement and the National Guard out here earlier today. They did slowly have to push those crowds back inch by inch until they were ultimately out of this area. Tensions were very high. Myself and my photographer even threatened at one point. Cell phone video capturing the tense moments as protesters are pepper sprayed by law enforcement on the steps of the U.S. Capitol building Wednesday. The group of pro-Trump demonstrators seen trying to breach the federal building, a task they ultimately achieved.
And it looks like everyone just wanted to get through, breach through, and get their voice heard.
And a large group of demonstrators that you are now seeing first started at the Ellipse before making their way over here to the U.S. Capitol after being instructed to do so by President Donald Trump.
The American people feel like their voices are not getting heard anymore. It feels like the government's telling them what to do.
For hours, we watched as thousands of demonstrators vandalized the U.S. Capitol building, at one point even verbally threatening to shoot us. Their message? Protesting the 2020 election results. The crowds, they say, a symbol of their support to uphold the Constitution. Throughout our live reports, we could hear police using flashbangs and a noise deterrent to push protesters out of the building, but it would take much more than a 6 p.m. curfew to clear them of the U.S. Capitol grounds. Law enforcement and the National Guard have been able to push protesters back a significant distance from the U.S. Capitol building, which is now secured. You can see them now forming a line with those shields right there as they move these protesters back feet at a time.
This is extreme times right now, and everybody wants to get their voice heard.
And as we come back to a quiet U.S. Capitol building, we can tell you that D.C. Mayor Bowser did issue a public emergency today. Well, we know that she has now extended that public emergency for 15 days. Again, the parking lot here that was filled with thousands of protesters now clear, but it was no easy task for law enforcement out here. They did create that line, ultimately creating a circle around some of those protesters who did not want to leave past that 6 p.m. curfew. We know that more than 30 people were arrested. For now, here in Washington, D.C., Roy Ramos, Local 10 News. Janice and Christy, well, according to U.S. Capitol Police, they tell us that they were prepared for demonstrators that would be exercising their First Amendment right. However, the mob that made their way inside of the U.S. Capitol did much more than that. We do know that demonstrators are back out here again today. Obviously, their numbers significantly smaller than what we saw yesterday, and that is likely because of the police presence out here. I did get a chance to speak to a few of those demonstrators who justified going inside of that building. A police presence and a 10-foot fence installed outside the U.S. Capitol building Thursday, a day after chaos unfolded. Pro-Trump demonstrators storming the federal building Wednesday after being instructed to march there by President Donald Trump himself. These images capturing the tense moments as protesters arrived. Watch as they're pepper sprayed by law enforcement, but the efforts of officers to stop them would not be enough.
I wanted to get close because, they're certifying a fraudulent vote.
The claims of widespread voter fraud in the 2020 election unfounded by election officials. And once again, pro-Trump demonstrators are out in front of the U.S. Capitol building. D.C. police watching closely and monitoring the situation. The question now standing for U.S. Capitol Police, how were protesters able to get so close, past officers and inside the Capitol?
There were no barricades on the stairs or anything, nothing like that. So we just walked up the stairs up to the Capitol building.
But this protester said he never made it inside, nor did he ever have any intentions of doing so.
What do you think about those demonstrators that did make it inside?
What are we supposed to do when our country's getting stolen from us?
While it still is not clear what tactics were used and what manpower was in place by U.S. Capitol Police, unlike the response to some Black Lives Matter protests, the response of law enforcement remained relatively peaceful, even as a shot was reportedly fired into the House chamber. Police arresting 68 people.
We still have a significant amount of work ahead of us to identify and hold each and every one of the violent mob accountable for their actions.
And U.S. Capitol Police Chief did issue a statement that read in part, the U.S. Capitol Police had a robust plan established to address anticipated First Amendment activities, but make no mistake, these mass riots were not First Amendment activities. They were criminal, riotous behavior. Now, as a result of last night's unfortunate set of events, we know that 41 people who were arrested were on Capitol grounds. Of those 41, only one of them was from the D.C. area. For now, here in Washington, D.C., Roy Ramos, Local 10 News.